Before we begin, I want to take a moment to ground us. I'm speaking from Hamilton, Ontario, on land covered by the Treaty of Between the Lakes and the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This land has been cared for by Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. It continues to be home to Indigenous communities today. I name this because harm reduction, overdose, and survival do not exist outside of colonialism. The systems that criminalize drug use, create housing insecurity, and allow people to die are built on land theft, displacement, and ongoing violence against Indigenous people. As a former drug user and a harm reduction worker, I've walked alongside Indigenous people that have been disproportionately targeted, over-policed, and abandoned by the very systems that claim to protect us all. Acknowledging the land also means acknowledging that overdose deaths are not accidents. They are political decisions made within colonial systems that decide whose lives are worth saving. If you're listening and this feels heavy, you're allowed to pause. You don't owe anyone your pain or your attention. Take care of yourself first. This podcast exists to tell people the truth about what's happening on the ground and to honor the people we've lost by fighting for something better for the people who are still here. And today's guest is someone that many people consider a matriarch of harm reduction in so-called Canada. Anne Livingston has spent decades organizing alongside people who use drugs, not above us, not speaking for us, but fighting alongside us. Long before governments acknowledged an overdose crisis, long before harm reduction became a buzzword, Anne was on the front lines demanding dignity, safety, and political power for the people the state had written off. She is a co-founder of the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users, VANDU, one of the most influential drug user-led organizations in the world. Under her leadership and alongside countless peers, VANDU didn't just provide care, it challenged law, medicine, and government policy head-on. They opened unsanctioned supervised injection spaces, distributed naloxone before it was legal, and proved that people who use drugs are the real experts in their own survival. Anne's work has always been unapologetically political. So yeah, for many of us, especially people who use drugs, peer workers, organizers, Anne isn't just an activist, she's a teacher, a strategist, and a reminder that harm reduction was never meant to be neutral. It was meant to keep people alive and to build power where the systems refuse to. And yeah, I'm honored to have you here today. Sorry, that was so long.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, you've been organizing with people who use drugs for decades, since longer than I've been alive. Not to not to age
True
you.
that.
But no, seriously, I'm 27 and yeah. When you first started this work, what were people fighting for and what were governments refusing to acknowledge way back then?
Well, the first thing was that we just had this massive, we had a very high number of overdoses in Vancouver in 1993, like 93, 94, 95, right in there. And I moved to the Four Sisters Co-op, which is 3 blocks from Main and Hastings, with little kids, and I was on welfare. The fire hall's right next to my windows. It was just siren after siren after siren. And the drug users were just abandoned on the street. They weren't the good poor. So they couldn't get into the housing. They couldn't even eat at the free food places. They couldn't do their laundry at the laundry places. It was a very interesting, to me, it was just like, oh, well, I know what to do. And so I started phoning everybody, and I just thought if the welfare would increase the rates for the employable men, who were mostly the people who were dying, and that the conditions in the SROs was improved, and if we could, just, I think I really respected that I didn't know anything about drug use, who didn't snort cocaine in the 70s or whatever, that kind of thing. But there was a real, I realized it was like a different culture that I didn't know about. So I invited drug users to my place, which was a 3-bedroom apartment, which was quite large anyway. And it took me a while to realize they'd never been invited to someone's home. And, I had little kids running around, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Anyway, then we formed a nonprofit society eventually. We did a bunch of sort of guerrilla work before that, where we had a guy named William Kay, who is just a very simplifying person, in the sense that he did the research I didn't know about overdose prevention sites and safe consumption sites in Europe. So he did a lot of that work. And we started just holding meetings, and we were called the Downtown Eastside Drug User Discussion Group. We eventually rented a storefront. It was quite cheap. And we got these 3 grants from a foundation. It was 3 $8,000 grants, but we had a cadre of people that were all on welfare, and we met on Commercial Drive at La Cana. And we had a number of groups meeting, the women's revolutionary discussion group, and then the more open one. And a lot of people that were on welfare that were very young had never been on welfare, and they had this sort of self-hating, poor people are bad thing. And of course, it was really high unemployment right then. It was just one of those crystallizing things that was happening right then. It was very, I don't think I had ever realized that you just go um, and look for a place to rent it. I put it in my name personally because I could sort of pass. I had a credit card, well, even though I was on welfare. You know what I mean? That kind of. So anyway, we just proceeded, and it took. That place was considered a scandal, and eventually the cops came in. And the police at that time, of course, wore wool serge suits with peaked caps. I don't know, with brass buttons. I don't know how to describe this
Yeah,
to
like they
young
look like
people.
the RCMP kind of like
Well, yeah, I mean, and then they changed, to have these pants, cargo pants, and black. You know what I mean? They just
the
changed their
army, well,
appearance.
warfare little getup
Yeah,
instead
yeah,
of the
it
country
was really.
cowboy getup. Yeah.
But honestly, in '93 and '94, there was actually a police strike on. It was weird because that meant they wore blue jeans to work. It was,
That's
you know what
interesting.
I mean? It was just a different time. The federal, you got to realize each drug law is a federal offense. So you get a federal prosecutor, or federal government has to charge approve. And they said, we're not doing any more possession cases, which is, nowadays would be considered super radical, like decrim. But
But
it was,
back then it was just because it was so much, it was wasting their
yeah, they just said, we're
resources,
not doing it. We're going
which
to
makes
just,
more,
I
I don't
mean,
know.
they just said, you go ahead and arrest these guys, but we're not doing charge approval. So don't waste our time, which was, and that didn't last very long. The police union then became a different union. It was more of a, government employee type union. And it became a Teamsters or something. I don't know. I mean, if you dive into that, there's some reason that happened. But we saw the whole police culture start to change after that. I think,
Yeah,
and
it's
then you're
basically
right.
like I dived into that because I'm
No,
crazy
no.
and I like to know everything. The police culture
Mhm.
changed kind of in the 2000s when the whole like the racialization of like brown people and like the whole Twin Towers thing happened. They kind of be like they switched their, at least in my generation. Before that, I don't know what made them switch like in the earlier generations, but I know that whole dynamic switched a lot of the whole like security and heightened sense of fear and stuff like that.
Well, it was so quaint in this neighborhood that there were meetings with police at the table and then all of the service
Yeah.
providers. It was, you'd never get this now. And they would just say how many homicides there had been and how many, they just tell us what they were up to.
And now it's
Even
like,
that, people that were running shelters, you'd hear about the same death 4 times. So you didn't know 4 people died or one. So it was kind of, it was just they viewed us almost as peers. And then that, it didn't last very long, but it was an interesting, um, really high, what was your high level of cooperation with the police in a sense. You got to remember too, though, that right at this time, the police are picking people up and driving them to Stanley Park and leaving them there, or driving them to UBC and taking their shoes. So they had to walk all the way. It's many miles to UBC if you don't know Vancouver.
oh, no, I do.
So it was, and also in the early '90s or the late '90s, as we saw, these overdose rates were extremely high. They didn't get hit again that high again until 2016 when the fentanyl hit. And most people forget this. It really peaked and then it came down and then it peaked up again just as fentanyl. And then, of course, you know the story from there. It's just shot right up and it's
Yeah.
not going down to any significant degree. But bureaucrats, the medical health officer, the people that were in charge of healthcare were absolutely panicked. And they were, not on my watch. They had a certain sort of pride, Dr. John Millar and Perry Kendall. Perry Kendall lasted for a very long time. And he's the one who gave us the Public Health Emergency Declaration, which is a very important legal piece of legislation
Yeah.
that
Very
can be
true.
implemented. And he did that in 2016. But back then, um, the coroner did quite a long investigation into what were these overdoses about. We had a community center that wouldn't allow drug users in, but they let them in just so they could have this coroner um, really have this public meeting. And it was a very emotional thing. And that's when I realized that I met Melissa Eyre, and and I just said to her, we got to start a drug user group here. We had heard about them in Europe to a tiny degree, but we just started to hold the meetings and hold the meetings and hold the meetings. And that's basically, all these years later, which is about 30 years later, that's still the MO. I'm organizing in Nanaimo, and I had organized a user group in Surrey. Because once it kind of got so VANDU was operating, I was extremely concerned about, well, for one thing, let's just be clear. You're running VANDU. And then the main thing, you just keep getting all these phone calls from people in tears on the phone. You got to help us. You got to help us. You know what I mean? So we're in Vancouver, in the downtown east side, just, you're busy enough, trust me. And then these other groups all across the province. And, Surrey is a very large community, almost the same population as Vancouver. Just terrible conditions. They had one for one exchange for their needles. They were spreading disease like crazy. Anyway, I figured, well, someone told me that they were starting to call VANDU ANDU. And I went, fuck, I'm out of here. And the main thing, I don't know if a lot of people are very conscious of that, but I'm really conscious as an organizer. Am I creating leadership? Is part
Yeah.
of my organizing ensuring that there's leadership, because you don't want to have to do everything yourself. And now that I'm 71, I really don't want to do everything myself. So the main, I just started to say, well, I think VANDU can continue on. And then I started as an unpaid person on welfare with still had children at home in a housing co-op, which means I'm protected from high rents, which is a very significant thing to consider about how did I pull this off. But you got to realize too that during these years, we then had the first unsanctioned injection site was before VANDU formed. I guess it was 2000, 2025, 26. I mean, sorry, 1995, 96. And I ran for city council along with a bunch of sort of radical people. I also ran for city council in, oh God, help me, 4 years later, 2000 or 2001. And then again, I ran for city council 3 times. And I was endorsed by the Green Party at one point. And that meant, and Bud Osborne, who was not central in the very beginning in the 90s, but as VANDU started to form, he's a co-signer on the VANDU forms, and really the essential first meetings we ever had. And Bud had this role as a poet, so that he must have spoke at 200 churches, and I used to drive him to them. And I don't know if you've ever seen his poetry. It's a very kind of liberation theology, and the cry of the poor is the cry of God. You know what I mean? This kind of really, guttural scream of pain. I don't know how to describe it other than it captures Christians, and it also has a very authentic way of not insulting people with a sort of charity. It means that their voice is the voice, and not Anne's voice. Their voice is the voice. And of course, Bud had been a heroin addict. I don't know how many years, but he was abstinent when I met him anyway. And that continued on for a number of years. He wasn't abstinent, I don't think, when he died, but he didn't ever go back to street heroin.
No, that's understandable. I've read a lot of his poetry, and like I've had, I guess not exactly similar because I don't know what your experience with him was, but I've been in a relationship with somebody who uses drugs prior to me trying any kind of drugs or anything.
Mm.
And the emotional turmoil that you go through when you are so deeply enveloped, anyways, involved, I guess I should say. I'm not going to use fancy words because I'm not smart. Well, not that smart. But yeah, when you're involved with somebody like that, and the love and the fear and like the grief that you carry on throughout your life, knowing that like that's their story and that's what they were born and died to do, is to be like, I don't know. I have a lot, like when I read
Well,
that story, I was like, damn, I feel that.
well, your voice and the stuff you write about with your father has that very raw, it's raw and it's innocent and it's beautiful and it's terrifying, all at the same time. And it's extremely impactful. And that also that's something parallel to what Bud's voice was. So
Yeah.
I encourage you, I'm just saying I just consider it a gift, and a gift to everyone in the movement, that it's so rare to hear. I've raised, so I had 4 children, and I have three. The fourth child was born in 2002, and the father of that child is Dean Wilson,
Mhm.
who took the charter challenge to the Supreme Court of Canada on behalf of Insite. So as Joe's gotten older, he has this funny sense of humor. He goes, "Yeah, my dad's the most famous junkie in Canada."
I know. I was just kind of going to say that. I was like, dude, that's
like,
like one of the most famous drug
well,
addicts in history.
well, it's just interesting because the tension of raising a kid who any minute we could get a call saying that their dad's dead or,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
else he's up to. And, Dean's kind of turned out, as it were. He has a job and I don't, which I find so ironic.
It's
And
so
he's
funny.
paid very well. I've never
Uh-huh.
been paid that well. So, if I plowed the way for that, then I'm fine with it. But
Exactly. I know that's how I feel. I'm like, even before I use drugs, because this relationship is what brought me into using drugs. He was the person I first smoked crack with, first injected
right.
fentanyl with, like everything. Everything that I know about drugs is from this, not only my father, but this boyfriend I had. His name was Pat, just to shout him out, I guess, in the podcast if he's out there somewhere. But yeah, that like his story and the things that he went through are also not only just my father, but also why I want to do what I do, because he is just a little boy trapped in this constant state of trauma. And like, yeah, I feel that when you are just waiting for that phone call where you're like, they're dead, or God knows what he's doing out there. But like, it's like, that's all I see his face in everybody on the street now, if that makes sense. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I do this because I don't want anybody else to feel what I have to feel every day of my life. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And the interesting thing about all of this is that I think there's this kind of there's not enough rational discussion where
Mhm.
how you're just raising your kids and you're going along and maybe you're middle class and maybe you're just working class, whatever. Is every moment of your anxiety about whether your child's ever going to drink a beer.
Sorry.
Education. My first husband was an alcoholic, and he drank. If you haven't hung
Yeah.
around with an alcoholic, you don't know what I'm talking about.
I know.
They drink, and it's just true. And this is what the public needs to understand. When you really get into the statistical analysis, drugs and alcohol, like all of these substances that have some sort of, you find that people are addicted to them. 20% of the people who drink alcohol, they drink 80% of the alcohol. And if you hang around them for a while, you realize that, like,
Yeah.
we're lightweights. We have a
Mhm.
couple of drinks a week, or we go out on Friday night, or even if we have a beer every single day, you gotta really, really, you're competing against some fucking Olympians if you think you're ever gonna outdrink those guys. And the same thing with these other drugs,
Yeah.
particularly cocaine. I think cocaine is the next drug that we need to say, let's cut the fucking bullshit.
We're all doing
Cocaine
it. I'm
is
not doing
not a destructive drug if people have access to it. The same
it.
number of people who become alcoholics might become cocaine addicts. And it's not really the drug that does that to them. It's whatever else has set them up their whole
That's
life.
yeah.
So, but in the meantime, we've got an entire country being invaded and the, president being taken back to the United States. And he declares, fentanyl, what did he call it?
Chemical weapon of mass
Well,
destruction.
mass destruction, yeah, and you hear that, and I'm thinking, "What's he up to?" Well, now we know what he's up to. If you can invade Iraq and spend billions
Yes.
and trillions of dollars of tax money bombing or whatever the fuck they did to Iraq.
Yeah.
No, but they
Like
love
it's
the war
like
on drugs, and when we think
yeah.
we're at the bottom with our squeaky little voices going, "Please, can we not kill any more people with this horrible drug war?" And then
They're just
when
like buy
you have these bigger,
drugs.
you go, they have no interest in stopping
No.
this, none.
No.
And because it's so useful to them politically, and it's not
Yeah.
just useful to them; it's useful to police. And then I'm going to go way out on a limb. Paramedics are now
Bro.
doubled and doubled and doubled
Yes.
again just to respond to this massive number of
A
overdoses.
paramedic, I got sick because
And
I ate an Ensure that was like, sorry, I'm sorry. A paramedic called me like a disease ball and wouldn't lift me up. They had no gurney to carry me. They wouldn't carry me down the stairs while I was violently puking and like shaking and couldn't move because of my drug addiction. They were basically like, no, you're disgusting and you have a disease. You're probably dirty. I'm not picking you up.
yeah, they're terrified.
Like, that is so scary. Anyway, say what you're saying. I'm sorry.
No, I think who points this out is this wonderful nerd. I don't know if he'd get upset. He's I don't know if he's as old as me, but he's close. He had this experience of being a social worker in Liverpool, and the history. That's why it's so great when we know the
Yeah.
history. In Liverpool in the 80s, I believe, there was a doctor there who was prescribing heroin and cocaine, like really, really. I don't know, it was on 60 Minutes, if you can ever see an old version of
Yeah.
60 Minutes, but that was the kiss of fucking death for them because after 60 Minutes, 60 Minutes super popular, everyone heard
Yeah.
this. They went over there and made sure that this was killed. So even heroin prescription in Britain is shit. And it used to be an actual program. What the doctors, if you look back at the history of how they created, one day people that were addicted to opiates were people prescribed opiates from their doctors. And then the next day they were criminals. And then they went after all the doctors who kept going. And they arrested a lot of doctors. That happened in the US. It must have happened in Canada. Canada always is this neutral little
Yeah, it's like
tiny,
if you look up the
I don't
history
know
of
what
like
happened.
methadone treatment, the history of methadone treatment is
The
like that.
doctors in Britain, the government never fucked with them. If they felt that this was the correct prescription for someone, they retained the right as a physician to prescribe that drug. And it was, so we had a period of time when, if you look at this story, anyway, that's the guy. He's now in New Zealand. I think he's retired. And he was a professor at some point. Anyway, he said that when we look at the war on drugs, we're not going to be able to end it unless what we do is we say, what can we do? And we think of all the things we can build and we should move forward with this and move forward with that. And we often do it. And then we can't figure out why we're dashed on the fucking rocks and we can't fucking get anywhere. And he says, you need to make a list of who is working overtime on steroids against your movement to stop this insane level of deaths and these bizarre war on drugs. And so he makes a very extensive list. And I think that's an important part of our movement, if we have a movement, is, and then we want it in the public eye all the time. If 70% of police work has to do with drugs, police are very invested, and it's easy to pick on the cops. I think if you really look at the dollars, though, and say how many billions, are being really spent on this, it's the healthcare system and it's the pharmacists get paid every time a methadone person walks in and takes their methadone in front of them. So they get a dispensing fee and a observed their ingestion fee plus any other pill you get a fee. And like if you start following the money on this thing, it's pretty quick that you realize most of the money is being spent in healthcare. And mostly I would say healthcare is supremely overfunded. And things like housing, Jesus Christ, you guys, there was a time in Canada, and it wasn't that long ago, that 17 out of every 100 Canadians lived in government owned, government controlled, rent controlled social housing. I couldn't be more clear here what I mean. It would be called the projects if it was, whatever. But that was huge. Now it's like 3 out of every 100 Canadians live in this. And they've,
The rest of them are homeless.
it's like, once you've got homelessness acting. So here's the deal. You could like, how, and it happens, people will just go, oh my God. And it's like, I'm sort of mocking when I say they see Jesus, that's it. Their desire to use drugs completely disappears and they never use a drug as long as they live. They still go back to living in a fucking tent because there's nowhere to live. Even the people in so-called recovery that can be very rigid and mean to harm reductionists, accusing us of encouraging drug use, they need to get on board with this. They're losing as many people as we are because relapses are lethal now. It's, you used to be able to, like an alcoholic can relapse, right? You go to the fucking liquor store, pick up and fucking drink. You don't usually get found dead. I mean, it could happen, but I'm just saying, so, but relapse is for people who use toxic, criminalized drugs that they get from God knows where. And once they've been out of touch with the scene, they are very, very vulnerable. And plus, they're trying to hide from their sponsor and their family and everybody else who now loves them because they don't use. They want to hide that. And so these secret little relapses are death sentences where if an alcoholic has a secret little relapse and climbs right back up on that wagon, for the most part, no one needs to even know it happened. and they go back to, their life. And these kind of things just aren't put into any kind of perspective. So we've got this frothing at the mouth bullshit about treatment, and there's no discussion about treatment. They act like it's pixie dust you sprinkle on somebody. Involuntary treatment, you sprinkle this treatment pixie dust on someone and they're good. They don't use drugs ever again.
Like, that's
What
not realistic.
planet do they live on? Have they ever met an addict? Like, that's not how this works.
And that's the problem. A lot of people like they don't understand addiction at its core and like that where it stems from or what is impacting this person to use. Like, of course, if I'm outside all day, I'm going to use meth. Meth increases my body heat. It makes me more aware. It keeps me awake for days so I can protect myself. You know what I mean? Like there are full and like there's survival strategies for living outside, and using drugs is one of them. That's why it's like this kind of goes into another question I had. Harm reduction is like such a buzzword now used by governments and institutions, including healthcare, to just gain funding and gain more traction and attention. How do you distinguish real harm reduction from the performative, like watered down versions? How would you say?
Um, and this is going to sound like a complaint. So for many years, whatever, like we had to fight like hell to get needles out during an HIV/AIDS epidemic in the downtown East Side. And we were just shit on and treated badly and unfunded, in a sense that a lot of it was done by volunteers, but heroic. Drug users are these heroes who go out and figure out, they design, how are we going to get needles out to people? And we do it. And the real needle exchange, which is funded and starts saying, you guys aren't professionals. You need to do one for one exchange. Well, one for one exchange spreads disease. It's like you don't have to think well, maybe you do. You have to think a little about it for a little while and you think, wait a minute. Everyone started injecting cocaine before
Yeah.
crack came, and they were using like 10 syringes a day each. And we also started testing for HIV right at that point under the Point Project, which is now the VIDUS, the Vancouver Injection Drug User Study, which is ironically funded by the US government under NIDA. And anyway, it was people in those days, the AIDS test would only tell you if you had AIDS 6 months ago because they measured the antibodies in your bloodstream, which took 6 months to develop. Nowadays, I think they really know if you got AIDS like right this minute
Yeah.
and whether you got it yesterday or, you know what I mean? You can get an immediate test. So people mistakenly, like they had a project, they were paying people to get tested and doing, it's a good research project. It's just that what happened was because there was no fucking needles and you were limited to 25 needles a week, and you had to do one for one exchange. Anyway, it's classic. Anyway, it's disastrous. People would think, they'd say, oh, I just got tested and I'm negative. Well, it didn't mean you're negative now. It means you're negative 6 months ago. And so people were sharing syringes. And we had this, it's called a seroconversion rate. It means, and it was 29 or 27%, unheard of. It was the highest outbreak of HIV ever recorded because it was being recorded by these researchers.
Yeah.
Anyway, out of 100 drug users who were HIV negative one year, the next year, 27 of them tested positive.
Like,
So that's how VANDU formed. We were
yeah.
like, oh, fuck you.
You
Like,
guys
what
don't
are
know
they
what you're
gonna, you know
talking
what I mean?
about.
We didn't even say fuck you. We just proceeded.
Yep.
What we found was that the people in the healthcare system who did the epidemiology and were in charge of keeping diseases low and that kind of thing, they took their job seriously and they didn't oppose us. We actually got funding from Vancouver. It's called the Vancouver Richmond Health Board, then it's now called Vancouver Coastal Health Authority. And like, for instance, in Nanaimo, we can't get funded by the health authority.
Yeah.
They treat us like absolute caca. Anyway, so we just kept organizing and organizing. And we couldn't get so this is the kind of surreptitious stuff that goes on because the street nurses who worked, I think, for the Richmond Health Board as well, they gave us boxes and boxes of needles. But at one point, even though we had very little funding and we're all on welfare ourselves working for free as volunteers, we actually purchased needles
Yeah.
because people were stealing the used needles.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think
people were selling the used needles and they were buying unused needles, of course, too. It's like, as I say, if you want to know if enough harm reduction supplies are going out in your neighborhood, talk to some drug users. If they're being bought and sold for money, you don't have enough of them out there, and
Yeah.
you're not, people aren't going to be okay. It's just a
Mhm.
sort of a tester. And of
Pharmacies
course,
out here will buy supplies from the
yeah.
free places and resell them for money to clients. It's sick. It's sick. Like in my city, that's happening right now. There's a pharmacy in Hamilton that will make drug users pay for needles that they get for free from the government. Like it's fucked up.
Well,
It's fucked
follow the
up.
money.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the big thing, I mean, I've done this before. I don't know if this is a bad thing to admit.
It's okay.
Boxed up supplies in great big, because I can get tons of shit. You know what I mean? Whether it's harder now to get bubble pipes for some reason.
I know
But
because it's the glass. They're shutting down all the glass shit. They
well,
don't.
you know, people break them all the time because
I
they've got
know.
this horrible tranquilizer and benzos, and
Exactly.
people pass out and drop their pipe and it
Mhm.
breaks. And so they're going through a lot of them. Anyway, the I'm still willing to do that. I've boxed up Narcan kits. I've boxed up needles. I boxed and sent them to, I think I put Narcan kits to New Brunswick to a bunch of Moms Stop the Harm women.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, that's what I do. I like
message
basically,
me if you want me to
yeah, for
send.
sure. Love that. Well, we're out here we have something from the Positive Health Network called
Mhm.
the VAN Project, the AIDS VAN Project, and it gets money because it's like they get funding for being an anti-AIDS,
Yeah,
HIV.
that's in Ontario.
Yes, that's an Ontario like a loophole kind of thing because we
That's
can't do
good.
anything harm reduction or drug user addiction right now. Like we're not allowed. So I've been getting supplies from them and then I go out I run the Solidarity Alliance of people who use drugs. So we're
Mhm.
24/7, 365 harm reduction
Hey,
outreach.
you have a drug user
I
group.
do. But it's
Oh my
just me.
God.
Like in
God.
Ottawa, I had a lot of people. I do have a lot of people that support me online, but not a lot of people who support me. I moved back home to Hamilton, so there's not a lot of people on the ground. It's just me. But I go around with my little red cart and I go hand out gear to people and respond to
Mhm.
overdoses. Just my hands and my Narcan, like the old days, no oxygen tanks.
I
And
should come out and show you that what we did in. So the big approach to forming a drug user group
yeah,
is to. So we've had some. You see, if you the library will
yeah,
let you have a meeting room,
I would love that.
and like the Surrey Library charges you money. The Nanaimo Library is free, and then it's a real tight dance with them.
Yeah, and
No,
everybody's
but
there to
anyway,
talk. Yeah.
we've if you have some people skills, you know, you just do your best every week.
Yeah.
You know, da, da, da. And then we give out money. We've been doing $10 each at the meetings, but we're going to lose our funding in May. 20 drug user groups in British Columbia are losing their funding in
Yeah.
May. So I just say, let's keep some powder dry. I keep warning the group, you know, when May comes, it's not going to be $10 anymore. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
5. So everyone suck it
Save
up.
your money.
But I find if the drug user group keeps meeting, even after the funding for everything else has stopped, because we've kind of been through this.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to, you know, I know it creates tremendous anxiety and fear that the hostility towards harm reduction is really hurtful and we're going to lose a lot of people and a lot. I just go keep calm and carry on, and
We've been through this
we've been
before.
through this before. And the main thing is what I worry about is the towns that don't have a drug user group. They're the
Yeah.
ones who really suffer because there's this huge gap, and this is the contradiction and upset. So we'll work for free 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't know, call you the worst mother in the world because, you know, people just, it's just
Yes.
a real commitment. And then the government realizes God, we're not going to let the drug users run the OPS. We better fund one. And then they give the contract to the Canadian Mental Health Association, who knows absolutely fucking nothing about drug
I
use,
know,
who
it's
have
so
no
bad.
drug users in any position of decision making power, which is a basic fundamental principle of fairness within
Mhm.
any organization, in my view. And I think people should pressure on that, and
Mhm.
not even a sort of, oh, this is our advisory made up of people who use drugs. Don't even bother with that. They're running it anyway. It infuriates me because while we were out there flapping in the breeze and the media, I mean, the media in Nanaimo was always fair to us, but read the comments.
Well, I experienced it myself. I'm trying to run for city council in 2030 in Hamilton, Ontario. No, well, thanks, but no, my city hates me. They hate me because I love drug
Well,
addicts, and I'm like, I can't. The whole city is made up of people who use drugs. Whether you're wearing a suit in City Hall
that's
or
true.
whether you're homeless in a tent, you've snorted a line of coke or you've shot a fucking little syringe of fentanyl. I don't care. Lie to your mother, not to me. And I know what you're doing behind closed doors, and I'm here for you too. I'm fighting for your rights too. Stop being so mad. But the city hates me. I'm on TikTok just my ex-girl, I had a girlfriend back in the day. I'm bisexual. Anyways, I had an ex-girlfriend back in the day. She has a whole hate campaign against me. She's posting my naked photos. Like, there's so much going on in my life. And I'm just like, is this what I literally, I was like, did Anne Livingston go through this? Like, what the hell?
No naked photos,
Thank God.
but
'Cause it was back in the day where there was no camera evidence, right? So it's like, damn. But anyways, it's just what a lifetime of
if
hell,
only,
right?
I actually, you could look back and say, did I really look like that?
I know. That's funny.
But anyway,
No, yeah, it's
there's
yeah,
worse things. I mean, that
for sure.
so here's how I would describe running for council for me. So, and it's a completely different time. So I'm just saying there'll
Yeah.
be a version of this. So there's, I don't know, so many people running for council, but you'll go to a community center, what do they call them? Citizens groups, or else it's the business association or something.
Mhm.
And they'll have an all candidates meeting. And so I always wore dresses, and then we're all there, and you just sit in a row, and then it's your turn, and you get 3 minutes.
Mhm.
So I'd get up and I'd say, so there were 25 murders in Vancouver last year, and there were about 23 pedestrian deaths, and there were 250 drug overdose deaths or
Mhm.
toxic drug deaths or whatever. And of course, you got to realize you just got to use whatever narrative was, but it was
Yeah.
striking. People go, what? And I'd say, how many of you have had your houses broken into? And everybody puts up their hand. And then how many of you had your cars broken into? Everybody puts up their hand. So I was trying to connect, you know what I mean? And I didn't win. But what I found was that they would sort of, the next candidates or whatever, as they proceeded, they can't unlearn that. I'm
Mhm.
not fucking lying. I
I
mean,
know, yeah.
so then they'd say, what about what she said to
Yeah.
the real candidates that really did win the election? And it wasn't, there's the strategy for running in the sense that you get to bring something to the public awareness. I mean, and I don't know, I'm so desperate to get anything to happen ever.
Any
I thought it
change?
was something. So I ran
Yeah.
3 times. I'm just saying. So, and I didn't do that badly. And Bud ran. Bud was in Cope and I was in Greens and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but that was in 2002, I believe. No, that wasn't. It was anyway. I can't remember the
It
years,
doesn't
and they
matter.
changed the pattern because
Mhm.
there's quite a few. And listen, we get most places in the world have a problem where they can't get the provincial government or their federal government to be pro harm reduction,
Mhm.
which is just basically pro public health. I
Yeah.
mean, you got to do something. Like, what did we? This is embarrassing.
Yeah.
All these people,
I know.
fucking piles and piles of dead bodies. Like,
I know.
really, it's Canada, for
I
fuck's
lived in
sakes.
Ottawa and there's literally people overdosing outside of the Parliament building, living in tents outside of the Parliament building. It's like you are a country, one of the third richest country in the fucking world, or one of them. I don't know if that's true anymore. Maybe the 11th. I don't know. I read somewhere on there we're really rich and also in debt at the same time. I'm not sure how that works. But people are dying and we're not doing anything about it.
Well, I think, I mean, and that's the real, whether because I'm so much older than you. Um, I'm 71. So what my memory is that Canadians had a certain pride that we
Yeah.
had a social safety net, and it's gone. And most people my age have a hard time grasping what I'm telling them.
Yeah.
But as someone who, so I, was on welfare, had job, had a welfare, and then job, that kind of thing. So I've mystery shopped the welfare system a number of times, and I can tell you the rates of welfare are shockingly low. And
Mhm.
BC used to have the highest rates in Canada. Guess who has the highest rates now?
Okay.
Alberta.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
Funny.
crazy.
Anyway, yeah. So there was a kind of sense that we had a social safety net. And
Yeah.
don't forget, I mean, this is something that our parents, my parents, who were born in the 20s and remember World War II, and my grandparents, who were born in the early 1900s and were World War I people, they had a real pride in that we would look after the widows and orphans from these wars. And, a tremendous sort of a pro peace. Once you've been through one of these wars, evidently, I mean, and of course, it's hard for me to understand this exactly, but my kindergarten teachers were from World War I,
Yeah.
and my parents are from World War II, and all my grandparents were in both wars, or my grandfathers. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. So there's a culture that people seem to forget that got created where we were going to have housing. We're going to have housing for veterans, and don't forget they fought for it when they came back to Vancouver after World War II. The soldiers simply moved into the barracks. So these are barracks for soldiers, and they brought their wives and children, and they didn't. I don't know what they said in the public. I haven't gone and looked at the newspaper clippings, but they was like, "We're
Housing
here,
for all the soldiers.
we're not leaving. So let us know when there's a place built we can move into."
Yeah.
There was nothing, and so a lot of those struggles, I think, are left out of Canadian history books because they don't want us to know.
Yeah.
Nothing that we've ever gotten, ever, whether it was welfare, housing, women getting the vote, women getting reproductive rights, any of that stuff. It was a bitter fucking slog, and they talked shit about the people that fought for it. You know what I mean? So I'm a little bit familiar with the reproductive rights thing because I was probably a teenager at the time, and my mother never swore a day in her life. What was an activist? Our home phone number was our actual home number was what do you call it? The police were listening in on our home phone because
Okay, yeah.
she was doing abortion counseling rights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People, and that was the practicality, and that's what's important in activism that I don't find for the theoretical activists. We have a lot of that, but you got to be on the ground. If you're not on the ground, two things happen to you. You're not smart because you don't know what the fuck's going on, and you're what I call it, you're not smart and you're arrogant. You make terrible mistakes. Like, we don't want services. I keep saying that. We can say we want services. We want overdose prevention sites, which are an actual service. But I just go, don't fight for services. Fight for human rights. Once you've got rights and you're recognized as citizens, you'll get services. But if you get services and you still don't have any rights, you're just a piece of like
Exactly.
some crummy,
Like these services are still being policed.
Yeah, the people that work there, and we've got
That's what's happening.
Well, I don't know if it's happening there. It's happening here. People filing WorkSafe BC files for a workplace injury because they were exposed to fentanyl smoke, and they work with people who use drugs. I'm like,
That's why the safe injection site in Ottawa got shut down, because people were smoking in the bathroom. I worked at 3 out of 4 safe injection sites in Ottawa, Ontario, and 3 out of 4 of the safe injection sites in Ottawa, Ontario are shut down because there was this outcry of people wondering what's going to happen to people if they're breathing in the smoke from the chemical fumes and da-da-da-da. So they installed all of these, what are those things that help the fans and exhaust pipes and blah, blah, blah. Whatever.
Yeah.
So they invest all this money in doing that, and then they shut them down anyway. And now it's a heart hub. And a heart hub is
WorkSafe BC is not a friend of the worker, in my opinion. As we say, could you go find someone who's actually being injured and fuck off? But what we've done is we've created a harm reduction industrial complex, they'll say. So the rights of the workers are more important than the people they serve. And I don't think it's the first. You can look at corrections. There's so many fields like this, but that's where we're and this is a really, if I become sort of, because I'm really thoughtful about what mistakes strategically did we make. As my philosophy was, okay, we're running a place that's unsanctioned or illegal. The cops won't come in and arrest us. And you know why? Because they know they're going to lose in court. You get into court and you tell a judge what, this is what we're up against. So I don't know, the Drug User Liberation Front trial is very interesting.
This is very important. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing the end result of this, because this will alter the course of humanity for people who use drugs.
It will. And I just want to warn you that the sex worker the prostitution laws went, whatever they call them. I'm sorry for my
No, it's
impolitical
okay.
language, but they went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and then, that's exciting. And the laws were struck down. And guess what? They wrote worse laws.
Yeah.
And it takes you like decades to get into Supreme Court to challenge a law. So then you think, well, let's just start over again. Like, you know what I mean? To again challenge the laws.
Yeah, and now
So,
the laws that they have in place are more dangerous for people who
well, sure. And this would, when Insite won the Supreme Court decision that Insite could not, it was a health facility for people who are labeled in such a way that they're actually considered to be people with disabilities. You can't not have a place for them. You're denying them health care, basically. And that was fine. And then Insight stands. But when they went to make the regulations about how to put an injection site in place or a safe consumption site in place, they made it absolutely daunting. So, of
Yeah.
course, I'm like, fuck you, watch this. We just open a tent and
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Like, I'm
And
not
people
gonna
are
listen
going,
to your way
oh, you
anyway.
don't have a license from the federal government? I'm going, yeah. Where can you see my finger? And when fentanyl hit here, it, you know, there's a real shyness I have about really being able to capture on
Yes.
camera. That's just shocking. So you're kind of, you feel like you're a refugee from some terrible event and you're
It's
trying to describe
basically
it to
like a
people, but
it's a genocidal war on people with drugs,
I'm
basically.
telling you, people were just yelling down the fucking highway, down the block.
Mhm.
And we got to the point where we would kind of run down to an overdose because people are screaming, overdose, Narcan. And we were running a street market because the way the activism works that I've partaken in was the cops decided before, what was it? I guess it's Olympics, that what they would do is give everyone jaywalking tickets. So everyone had a fucking jaywalking ticket at VANDU. So
Mhm.
we took all the jaywalking tickets and we went down and disputed all of them. So we got like 150, 200. And the fucking people at the little office where you
You're
do
like,
this, they're just like, oh God, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, you could tell the cops, whatever idiot decided to give out all these jaywalking tickets. Anyway, we disputed them. It took a whole year and we got like 800 of them withdrawn,
Mhm.
fixed, whatever they're done. But there was another 200 tickets and they were all for um, blocking pedestrian traffic because there's this huge kind of market atmosphere where people just um, indigenous people do it like crazy. I don't know if you've ever been to an indigenous event. It's like a fucking market as well
Yeah.
as a conference on blah blah blah. There's all these tables set up everywhere where people are
Mhm.
selling shit. Anyway, it's just I guess
It's
I
just
mean,
thing.
who knows? I haven't studied it, but it's a tradition or it's
Mhm.
just how human beings are or something. So all along the sidewalks, people were setting up selling shit, and they were giving them tickets, and we had this kind of look. Anyone in Vancouver can hold a garage sale or a yard sale, and they don't have a garage or a yard, so it's the sidewalk. So
Yeah.
fuck you. We're disputing all these tickets, and they finally, we didn't really get anywhere, but we started to take over this little park called Pigeon Park.
Mhm.
This is activism 101. Then they'd say to us, "You don't have a permit," and I'd always say, "I'm sure you'd be happy to give us a permit." And
Exactly.
I was working with Dave Murray and it was just so much fun. You just get up, we'd make this huge pot of coffee, we'd go down there and we'd have these bets on. Like it hardly ever snows in Vancouver, but I'd go, there's fucking snow. We don't have to work today, right? So we'd cruise down and we'd look and they go, shit, they've set up in the snow. And then we go back, make the coffee and show up. And we
Yeah.
just brought we had stolen these barricades from, I don't know what they do in Ottawa or anywhere, but in Vancouver, sometimes if they're doing construction or something, they'll just toss all these
Yeah, yeah.
kind of, barriers and stuff, and they just set them aside at the side of the road. So you take one or two at a time, and we just hide them somewhere. And then eventually we had all these barricades. Well, not, four or five of them or
Yeah.
whatever. Then we
Block
just set
people
them
in.
up to block the streets off, and it says City of Vancouver. Like it looks official, right? And then we the market just set up. And in fact, that market, So every week we'd meet with the city and the police would be there and I'm sure you'd be happy to give us a permit. Like whatever. They know it's like the resistance. There's like 50, 60, 70 people there. What the fuck are they going
That's
to
the
do, right?
problem. I wanted to say that. I think
Mhm.
back then there was a lot more of a community of drug users being willing to put themselves in the front lines to make a difference. And now, when
Well,
I try to organize people,
mhm.
everybody is so afraid of the backlash and like not even just the political backlash, but the media backlash, the social, like the parasocial backlash, all of these things. People are so worried to be looked at as something that they're not that they don't even give it a chance. When I was in Ottawa, people didn't want to work with me because of like my mental health and like the things that I believed in, the way that I spoke, the way that I acted during my drug
Yeah.
use. But it's like these are the rights that we're fighting for. My right to be as fucked up as I want to be,
You ever seen the VANDU manifesto?
maybe. But what do you
Anyway, I'm just saying there's one part in it. It says we have the right to obtain, ingest, and be high on drugs.
Yes.
And it comes from another guy that we stole it. Well, we didn't steal it. We acknowledge him in our little thing.
Hmm.
Anyway, and he's dead now. But anyway, I said, so it's wine. We're a wine tasting club, and we have the right to obtain, ingest, and be intoxicated on wine.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem outrageous at all. But if it's drugs, everyone's just like hysterical, like you're
Hmm.
fucking. Anyway, it's a great manifesto, and I encourage
Yeah.
your group to have a look at it.
I
And,
probably have read it on my own, but I haven't
well,
shown it.
it's on the VANDU site. I'm always trying to get
Cool.
people to really adopt it because I
It's
don't know,
important.
it took us 10 weeks of meetings to come up with that document. And you know why we did it?
Mm.
Because these groups that had gotten all this harm reduction money, VANDU's still underfunded like crazy. They're running the OPSs and shit, and they're getting all this cash,
Yep.
and they're running shelters. I don't know, all kinds of shit. Anyway, and they would set up, I guess, a peer group or support
Yeah.
group or something. And I thought, well, if they're a drug user group, what the fuck is VANDU? So we thought, well, we better say what we are then. So we thought about what's the difference when you go to you know a group that's actually an employee of a large NGO who's holding a support group for peers. And then VANDU, which has a sort of manifesto, like that's why we wrote the
Hmm.
manifesto. But so anyway, that's why we wrote it, was to differentiate between um, people with lived experience or people with lived and living experience. And we've got that written into all the contracts here, where you'll get. So here's the dirt on Nanaimo. So we ran a place for 80,000 a year. Over 40 of that was the rent, the landline. Don't ever run a place without a fucking phone. Like, you
Right.
just never know if everyone's going to have a charged phone. And then internet and garbage pickup, whatever the
Hmm.
fuck. You know what I mean? It was just what it cost. And then the place was completely run by drug users with no staff. And we were open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was COVID. So
Hmm.
you can sort of get away with it in a sense. I don't know. No one came. And then they opened, there was a call for proposals to do an overdose prevention site that would include
Yeah.
smoking, because everyone switched from injection to
Yeah.
smoke.
Yeah.
And the injection site, which was run by Canadian Mental Health, had three little places, but they shut down one because of COVID distancing.
Hmm.
And then everyone was smoking. So I said to them, like, just put a tent outside so people can smoke outside. Oh, we
Well, how
might lose
dare
our
you?
funding.
Yeah,
I said,
exactly.
well, and here's the thing. It's all
And
about
that's what
creativity.
happened.
Well, they didn't fucking do anything. So our place, we got these tents that were 20 by 20. And then we got another tent that was 20 by 20. And I said, well, this one, I just, every time you come to one of these things, my job as an outsider is to observe what drug users do, what they say, what their culture is, how they, you know what I mean? There's a kind
Yeah.
of,
I have a question about that actually.
yeah.
Like,
So I
yeah.
just observed them, and I thought the tent was for our meetings.
Mhm.
So people are using in the tent, but you can't see them. That means we got to put a volunteer in there. And now that's a place where people are smoking
Yeah.
and then and injecting whatever the hell they're doing. So I said, oh, let's get another tent. That'll be for our meetings, because I'm like a meeting freak. I think
Yeah.
everything's meetings. So Then people are using in there, and we don't have anyone watching them, and you can't see them, and we're going to find someone dead on our lots. So
Yeah.
then we joined the two tents together. So we had 20 by 40 tents, and there was an average of 35 people there at any given time. But that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
One little stipended volunteer was getting $20 for 4 hours or something because we had no money left. But because the steering committee of that group was deciding, okay, here's our budget. Here's what's left. How should we do this? We tried to only be open till 6 o'clock in the summer. It's like it's light out at 6.
Hmm.
We're going, oh no, leave now. We're closing. It was hell. And then they'd, be a menace to the Dairy Queen next door.
Yeah.
So there's going to complain. So we just said, okay, we're going to just stay open till, I don't know, it was 12 hours a day. Anyway, so I think it was 10 to 10. And then we tried to get them to leave at 10, which was another chore because they were all fucking homeless and nowhere to go. But anyway, it was a tremendous amount of engagement and tremendous success. The overdose rates were 5 a month during that
Yeah.
time. They opened the new site, which we applied for the funding for the new site. So I know what the funding is. It was um, it was 900,000 plus change. So I would just say it was $1 million.
Hmm.
And that was for a tent. And then the overdose prevention site opened, and it was run by Canadian Mental Health Mid Island. And they're open from, I think it's 11 till 9, which it means last calls at 8:30,
Hmm.
which is mental. And
Yeah.
Nanaimo has a tremendously high overdose rate when you compare it to other towns. We get all these
Hmm.
data. Anyway, we knew it was a problem, but it's really embittering to see that our work, my hypothesis is they would never have opened that other place without us being there. The most important thing I think the sort of unsanctioned sites can do is put pressure on so they'll open a sanctioned site. But now I'm starting to really rethink that because the sanctioned site, you're barred for life because you,
Yeah.
I don't know, took a swing at somebody. Like, whatever, fucking get over yourselves. As I always say to people, if you are dealing with people who are really fucking out there, I mean, I'm not I'm not naive. I'm there. I tried to train my brain so that instead of going, how dare you treat me like that after all I've done
It's
for you,
why
to
are you treating
say,
me like
"Oh, I think that guy's having a bad day." And then I
that?
think, no, I think that guy's having a bad decade. Like, for fuck's sakes, you talk to people and you start to realize the circumstances of their lives.
Hmm.
25 foster homes, followed by juvie, followed by prison. Like, for fuck's sakes, get over your stupid little hurt feelings. And
Hmm.
if you don't have that perspective, like, get a
Get
different
the fuck.
job.
That's what I'm saying. Get the fuck out of the way for the people like us that do have that perspective. So all of the safe injection sites and shelters in Hamilton, Ontario. Well, you know what? I'm going to speak for all of Ontario because I've been around. Are all run by people that have, and I don't have any ill will against religions and things like that. I don't care. But it's all people that are like have that missionary mindset where it's like, I'm coming in to save your life. No, our lives are fine the way they are. We're happy the way we are. We just want a house so that we can be high in warmth. We want food so that we can eat when we're high. Like, you know what I mean? The basic human things that you get because you're not high is what we want when we're high. And I don't understand why there's such a big disconnect between like, yeah, like shelter workers and this whole like I fell in love with a client when I worked at a safe injection site. I lost my job for that client, like the guy Pat. But now I'm labeled as this like horrible person for crossing boundaries and blah blah blah. Like watch this woman, she's a weirdo predator who falls in love with drug users. It's like I'm a drug user. You're supposed to be a drug user. Where is this line? Because these are people that are part of my community. Why am I being penalized for this relationship? Like, you know what I mean? When the whole entire point of harm reduction and helping people is to walk alongside them. Like we live in community with these.
They don't. They're
Yeah,
entire.
they
They
don't.
to keep their funding and to the contract that they have to do their deliverables. And I
Yes.
think, and listen, it sound too bonded, but I got into this whole thing where, I was a client fucker, as it were, because I was with Dean
Yeah.
and before that with Bud. And
Hmm.
and then I thought, let me think, am I having a lot of sex with all of these people in
Like, is
this
this
group?
bad?
I was like, well, let's see. I don't know. I don't think so. But
Related.
I think this is that sense of healthy boundaries and what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, so and I don't know how to go there. We had Mark and Liz were married and worked at Portland Hotel Society.
Yeah.
We had the head of BC Housing involved with Atira, the ED of Atira. Was that a conflict of interest?
That's what I'm saying. It's
People
like,
can fuck off with their bullshit. And I think that if someone is a sexual predator, they should be called out, or me, or a guy, or whatever.
yeah.
I'm just saying, because the power imbalance. Here's the thing: I don't think that this client service provider relationship is something that can succeed.
No.
And that's why service provision can't work. So, and the reason I know so much about it is because my oldest child had cerebral palsy and autism. So he was involved in receiving services for children with disabilities and then adults with disabilities. And there's a guy named John McKnight who is very clear that being a client is not a healthy thing. In many ways, being a renegade group of organizers who are breaking the law is very, very empowering. And this is the horrible letdown, right? So drug users invented needle exchange, they invented overdose prevention sites, and now obviously they've invented this buyer's co-op model. And they'll go from being these heroic, creative, hardworking people, and now they walk into the place they fought for, and they're a disobedient client who's taking more than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this, and we can't, like when Insite opened, you couldn't have a criminal record and work there. But, here's the thing. I mean, you end up in this broader movement, and there's always this moment where you think, well, this is how I used to do it. The drug users got really, really mad when our needle exchange got taken over because we were doing an outdoor needle exchange and it got taken over by Portland Hotel Society. And they basically just used us. They were receiving funding and administrating our funding. So these guys were really fucking mad. And I said, no, I don't know if this is the hill we want to die on. Let's just be more radical. Let's do an overdose prevention site.
Okay, let's pick it up a notch. You want the
I know, but
we'll do something else.
But when you look back, and especially when we see these overdose prevention sites that are run so poorly,
Yeah.
by
They're
people,
not even run at all in Hamilton. There's
I
one,
know.
but it's only so in Hamilton there's one for the YWCA, and we have overdose average like 18 times higher than our entire province.
Oh, is that right? So
Yeah.
Hamilton's a real.
Hamilton's bad. Like Hamilton is a hot epicenter of the overdose crisis right now. Just as much, it's like the Vancouver of Ontario. Yeah.
So that's a
Toronto is right there. Yeah.
What's your? Do you guys know your numbers? Like,
right now, off the top of my head, I just did a delegation. Yeah, I just did a delegation the other day, and I know I have the numbers somewhere. I could Google it.
Well, there's a guy named Sam Friedman, and he did some of the first ever published peer-reviewed papers on drug user groups in the 90s, the early 90s. I don't know.
Hamilton's opioid-related death rate has historically been and continues to be significantly higher, around 45% greater in 2022 than the provincial average for Ontario. So it's the highest opiate mortality rates among large urban centers in the province.
Okay.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't even know that. Like I didn't Google that until now, but
yeah. Well, Sam said, Sam Friedman, PhD, totally like a nerdy professor guy. Like, anyway, he said he came to Vancouver. God, what year? 98, 97, I don't know. Anyway, and he did an assessment of Vancouver, and I remember the quote he put in the paper was, and the report was, VANDU has potential to be one of the strongest drug user groups in the world, which is basically, anyway, just because we were the epicenter, and plus we were organizing like crazy. But anyway, he said, what you want to do is teach drug users epidemiology. They should know the AIDS rate, the Hep C rate, the overdose rate. And if you really can't ever get anywhere in terms of what we really think of as getting somewhere, at least you'll have the smartest drug user groups around. You know what I mean? They're well informed. And that in popular education, that's the model I use. So I can go look up a paper and then try to take that paper and put it in, like, not to be insulting, I would always have a copy of the actual paper because some There's drug users that are like fucking smart as shit and they like reading papers. And then there's people that you're trying to communicate with that you want to make it nice and clear and make sure you have everyone got this. Anyway, I would
Easy
make sure that
digestible
people
language.
discuss this. And because the real magic happens there, you go, well, why is the drug use, why is the AIDS rate so high in Vancouver? Where are people sharing needles? You'll hear it right from you look at a guy and you just think that guy can't possibly have anything to say that's going to really add to the discussion, and you just have to discipline yourself. They really do have something to say.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
not
what
out at
I
three
was gonna
o'clock in the morning
ask.
in an
Like,
alley. He knows shit I don't know.
yeah. I was gonna ask, what did you learn early on from people who use drugs that fundamentally shaped your politics? Like what when you were working with people, like what
The
changed
main
for
thing I learned is they're not politically correct. You're going to hear racism, sexism, and all that kind of shit. And I just think the way I did it was, rather than freaking out and saying, I just think to myself, well, there'll be a teachable moment about this, but it's not right now. So let's just keep going. And, you know, to deal with the first board of, or yeah, steering committee and then board of VANDU was all men. There was no women. And they were all either Black or Native. I was like, what? And I don't know, she's famous, but she's dead. And from way back. Anyway, she
Yeah.
came to Vancouver. And I said to her, I said, how come the whole board is Black or Native? And I'm like this little white woman.
You're like, I'm just by myself. You're like, hey.
Well, whatever. And she said, because they can't pass. She says they get followed when they go into a store already.
Yeah.
And, the other thing was that and this is an older generation of people, because, we're all so old, they remember AIM. Like they remember the American Indian movement. They remember
Mhm.
the whole Black Panthers, Martin Luther King. They knew what a kind of struggle for rights was. And they call and that was the real origin. Like Bud and I, we talked a lot. We didn't write the Constitution and bylaws exactly, but we really created the sort of basis for what we were doing. And it was liberation theology, which is the positive side of religion, which basically states that the voice of the most poor, marginalized person is the voice of God.
Mhm.
So it really turns that on its head. There's a kind of part of Christianity now that, well, if you're rich, it's because God loves you, right? And if you're
Yeah.
poor, you're being punished or something.
Which is not how
This one
religion
reverses it so that the the cry of anguish and the cry of the poor and the most marginalized person, that's God's voice. And if you look into their eyes, you're looking into the eyes of God, as it were. So that's a philosophy. I shouldn't talk endlessly about it, but I'm just saying that's a really interesting sort of spiritual level to understanding what you're not just up against, but what's the authentic voice. And so as an organizer, because I'm not a drug user, my popular education goal is to take their information, which I know nothing about, and bring it forward and then bring my analysis. Like if I go do a bunch of research and find out the politics of things, for instance, you need to know when you're dealing with police, it's municipal. You don't necessarily take it to the federal government. If you're dealing with AIDS rates, it's both federal and provincial. If you're dealing with housing, it's both federal and provincial. You know what I mean? So that you're
understanding your politics, where
yeah.
you're coming
And
from.
the method I used was you get the information and then you start to say, what's our priority? Is it police violence? Is it this? Is it this? This is what you guys have said, and I've taken notes because I did take notes on what people said. And then I try to categorize it into problems with police, problems with housing, problems with welfare, that kind of thing. And then we put it all up at the end of 6 or 8 weeks. It's time when they go, is this all we're ever going to do is talk about what's wrong? I go, yeah, no, we're ready to move on. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we would say, is this really what you guys said? Because this is what I thought you said. Is this true? Like, because I might have misunderstood someone. Then we look at all that, and then what are we going to do action on? And if it's going to be, if the action's going to be the first action that VANDU ever did was, and this is so funny too because it's so Canadian. They said if Canadians knew the circumstances under which we lived and the hell that's going on down here, they do something about it. So we want to do a demonstration and a press conference, and we want to make sure the public starts to be aware of the circumstances under which people are living in this neighborhood, and people who use drugs, what's happening to them. And I was like, so that's the first action we did. And then we come back from the action, which took weeks. It was like everybody had to get up and say, "But what if we get arrested at the demo?" I'm going, you guys fucking score drugs. I don't know how many fucking times a day. I can't even imagine how terrified I am to go to the corner with some money and try to find someone to sell me some
Yeah.
drugs and worry that I'm going to get arrested. And now you're worried that we're going to get arrested at a demo. What are they going to charge us with? Carrying a placard? Like, you know what I mean? So I had
Yeah,
to bring,
that's what I'm like struggling with everybody.
well, it was hard, but I just had to let it rip week after week after week. Anyway, then finally, after many weeks, we finally did the demo, and then we come back. So we made the papers. There's no such thing as papers anymore. So whatever, I'm not caught up.
Social media, I guess.
Yeah, whatever happened. I mean, there's still TV. Anyway, you do, and we like the Nanaimo. There's still a little community paper in Nanaimo, and we got press. And the Czech TV in Victoria, worker owned TV station that was going to go under and the workers bought it. Anyway, they're still pretty mainstream. You know what I mean? You're going to get media.
Yeah.
So then we analyze the media. How did that go? What I mean? And then we're back at it. You just keep doing this circle of what are the issues? Why do we have those issues? An analysis of the issues. What action should we take? Take the action, analyze the action, back to the beginning. What are the issues? You know what I mean? So someone told me that was Maoist the other day. I was like, really? I don't think so.
You're like, okay, maybe.
I don't think Mao gets to take credit for that. But anyway, that's and I would try to be quite disciplined as an outsider, that it's not, it's me bringing their voice. And then also the hardest thing is to make sure that they stay democratic and they don't just quit or all break up, and that conflict can be handled so that it has the beginning of the conflict, the middle of the conflict, and the end of the conflict, and we're not fucking dissolved.
Well,
So
that's what happens a lot of times. There's a lot of like controversy in the harm, especially surrounding me. People hate working with me because I am an active drug user. Well, not active anymore, active drug user with mental health issues, and I'm not politically correct. So the places that are co-opting harm reduction, like I've lost jobs for like mentioning my relationship with the client or like mentioning my political beliefs and my addiction and things like that. And there is no conflict resolution right now in the mainstream harm reduction.
no, but you're dealing with service providers.
Even people even like, I'm not talking about like drug users because I'm talking about like other social activists. So for example, my Solidarity Alliance page, I have like an Instagram page. I still have a large following, but I used to have a large group of people in Ottawa that were working with me when I experienced like a drug-induced psychosis and was acting out online and doing all this stuff. All of the people that organized with me, rather than coming in and being like, hey, Kayla, what's going on? Let's fix this. Like, we need to take your access away, have some accountability measures, some kind of conflict resolution. Everybody left and stopped working with me. And then I had to move to Hamilton to restart my organization so that I was able to like get work done again. Because I find, especially, this is mostly with mainstream organizing, especially online, a lot of people feel like liking or sharing a post or posting something is enough. But then when you have like an event happening or something, nobody really shows up or helps out with it. Not a lot of groundwork being done. Like
we didn't count on anyone backing us up, but that's that methodology, to just hold the meeting every week, no matter what, at the same time, on the same day, no matter what. It falls on Christmas Day, we still have the fucking meeting. Like, just that was the biggest sort of breakthrough. And the same thing happened when we set up the 2016 tent in the alley. The main thing was 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, no money, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I had the luxury of being the closest person. And because I'd already been through this before, and I really got that if we could sustain 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for enough weeks, then we could
Thing will
break
happen.
through. And then of course they funded it and the thing became shit or whatever
Yeah.
it became. But it had to become something because you don't really necessarily have a choice.
Mm.
And we were being, I had people coming up to me and saying, well, because I said, look, they're taking data. Like, someone comes in, they write down, I don't know if they were writing down a name or handle or something, what drug they were using, what time they came in, and whether they overdosed or not.
Yeah.
People were from 0 to 100, like very quickly, because it hit, all just hit, and no one knew how to dose it. So lots of people were over, really in danger and really frightened. Anyway, I said, could you just get someone to come at 4 o'clock or something every day and we'll just hand them the sheets because they could write the date at the top and then just keep our data for us. I'd look over in the big rainstorm and I'd see our sheets floating along down the gutter. You know what I mean? So we're taking data and the guy goes, I can't be seen to having anything to do with your group, with your tent. I could lose my job. And these are the most radical fucking people I knew. You just can't underestimate the fear. And then, I don't know if I just have broken through and you just get old after a while, but my anger at that or my shock, I was just like, what? Anyway, okay, back to it. Don't worry. I've just got a kid at home and I'm on welfare and I'll do the fucking 12 hours a day.
That's
You
what
know what I
I'm
mean?
saying.
You have to kind of restrain yourself because you just, they have their own little, I don't know, whatever. It's, here's the question. And this is what Bud always said. If what I'm going to do next or what I'm going to say next or what we're going to do next, how excited we're going to get, is this going to save a life or avoid the harm to the most marginalized drug user in this community? If it is, I'll do it. If it isn't, shut the fuck up, get over it, and suck it up and go on. Because that was the only way to discipline yourself because there's so many things that happen. And you just had to keep thinking, am I going to go down this rabbit hole? Am I going to have this fight? Is this going to save a life? Is this going to, because if you're really in touch with those people, then you have that reference point at all times. And to be fair, that's really why Bud lost it. And the reason he lost it is because he went to too many meetings with too many bureaucrats and he didn't come to the actual grassroots meetings and listen to what the people on the street were saying. It saves your fucking life because you go into these rooms with these bureaucrats. And I used to get almost seized with, this kind of sense of, I have this profound belief that there's no evil, there's no such thing, and that all people are good and we're all going to heaven. I have this, I don't know, I just have this belief. And then I started to go, fuck, these people aren't going to heaven. These are really evil people. They're rich, they're really well paid, they're super educated, they have a lot of power, and they can save all these lives. They can do the most simple thing to save these lives, and they're not doing it. And I would be like lying in my bed going, fuck, they're not going to heaven.
Yeah, like they
And
are good people.
so here's the deal. So I finally pictured them in their own families with their own children. And I realized if they're selling out these people on the street and these people who have nothing, then they must do the same thing to their own children and their own relationships. And then I just had this wave of compassion for how pathetic their lives are. And I was
You're actually
my torment and I could sleep again. That's my little story about.
honestly that helps a lot. But this goes into what we're saying. I just need to go whoosh. Like you are
Right. It's I think the word just that shouldn't be in that sentence because these are not small things.
yes.
As people, they should just stop using drugs. I go, well, they should stop using drugs. I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'd be fine. But I don't think you should put word just in there.
Mhm.
You can't even fucking give up coffee. So this is like, go ahead, try it. And let me know how that goes. So don't say just. It makes it sound minimal. But I think we can do big things and it takes some, sort of big efforts and it takes big solidarity and it takes sort of not quite a humility, but if you just thought, okay, I've got this many days left in my life, this many years, and then it comes down to days. If between now and the time I die, will it make any difference that I did anything? And then just think that. What could I do today? And I mean, it sounds, and I think maybe some people think that's really arrogant or something. It's not. If you think that things are going well, I don't.
It's like things are going
Convince
terrible.
me.
How worse can it get? And I'm gonna make it worse by being myself. Probably
Well,
not.
I mean, I think and this is one of the problems, when we get into this disunity and these drug user steering committees or boards, or however you can structure some sort of structure where you can do conflict resolution, and that is it going to just be, oh yeah, remember when we had that user group for a couple of years, yeah, that was fun.
No.
You know what I mean? Or is it going to leave a legacy? Is it going to be like it? And you have to also realize you're never going to get credit. That's a tough one. And they finally gave me a PhD at UVic, but it was funny because it was so not really contrived or anything. But I remember, someone nominates you. They have to do this whole process, and they're going to give you an honorary degree. Well, it's a huge honor to get this. It's not, it's not nothing. And then if you're going to play over bashful, oh, I'm so humble, no, I can't accept that, or you say, do you think the mayor of Nanaimo will glare at me the way he fucking glared at me last time when I'm sticking up for my people, as I call them, the people that are very likely to die, and he's being a fuckhead? Do you think he'll be as mean if he realizes that someone else thinks that I deserve to be acknowledged as someone with knowledge, and, that it's an honor, and, that I've done something worth acknowledging? You can always just say, oh, well, that's conceited and you shouldn't really do that. Well, suck it up. It's the same way as eating shit. You have to sometimes eat compliments as well. And it's still at that moment where you have that thought, is this going to make it, um, if bringing, like, it must happen to you too with your work, where you'll be famous for being the junkie's daughter, or does it really, and then how that could be humiliating, or people could make fun of you? Like, it's a vulnerable thing, but your vulnerability is your strength, as Bud has always said. It's the very thing that you're most not embarrassed about exactly, but it's a very frightening thing to reveal it. That's the thing that has the most power and resonance with other people. And that, like, I mean, I wasn't trying to give you false compliment.
No.
Your stuff is very, very, you know what I mean? It speaks to that, because I think there's got to be thousands and thousands of kids who have to cover up that their dad was a drug user or went to jail, or, these things that are kids can make, everyone, like, it's just humiliating. And even being a drug user, of course, that's the other thing where, you know I'm a person who uses drugs, I live with dignity and respect, you know what I mean? And then there's people who say, I tried that a number of times, but I've discovered that I'm not ever going to use drugs again. Like, Gina Elson's a terrific person who gave it a few kicks at the can, and has discovered it's not that common that somebody can be around drugs and drug users and have been an ex-user, and it's a tremendous gift. And I think that's what, we need to acknowledge it in ourselves if we have a gift, and we need to be able to give our gift. I don't think, I gave this speech at UVic, and I should clip it because I just was puzzled. Like, what am I going to say? There's these thousands of students that are graduating, and their parents are all sitting in the audience waiting for their kid to walk across with that goofy hat on and the gown and get their little round circle thing. They're getting a degree, something they really pounded in a lot of hours for. And I thought, what can I say to them? So I said, this is a lot of trouble, to be an activist. And um, it's not really a career choice, it's not well paid.
It's
And
not
I'll
paid at
tell you,
all.
I know. And I said, so why would you do this? I said, because we have the best people we work with. We have the deepest sense of mission. We have, you know, um, the best children. We have the most, you know what I mean? There's a way, because I'm thinking back on when I had that moment where, I see this bureaucrat who's got a beautiful home and a fancy car and a big degree and a huge income and all this stuff. And yet she doesn't, she's not making a difference. She's like, I'm just in anguish
Yeah.
that this moral, how could someone be like that? Just to turn their back on this. They have so much power and they could really make a difference and they're not. Then the reverse of that is, and then finally I just said, we have the best sex. And then the whole room went nuts. But there's a kind of profoundness when you can live your life.
Just like
Well, it
you,
was funny.
you.
Well, it's not that. They weren't aware of any of the, I mean, that's been dropped.
I
That's been
know.
dropped a long time
I
ago,
know.
basically, because it wasn't true. You know what I
I know.
mean? The anyway, the
It's just
I think that's the we people are attracted to a movement because it adds to their life and it adds to their aliveness and it gives a sort of sense of profound meaning and it has um something worth doing,
yeah.
way back I used to say, well, what are you going to do, get a big job and buy a BMW? Is that really it? Like, fuck.
Like,
Like,
am I gonna be
it's
bored for the rest of my life?
well, it's not that. That's not very challenging. I
Eh,
mean, it is, I don't know if I
I
can ever
guess.
do it, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like it's a bit hollow, just saying. And then there's this other way of being in the world and I think it's got its own sort of protective sort of quality to it. Like, we've now got Eris and Jeremy who've put themselves on the line and they could go to jail, theoretically, they could go to jail for
For
life.
their lives. I know.
And, I don't think they're going to. I'm just saying.
And they don't.
But you can see that they've clearly thought this through before they began to engage in that. And I don't think people will jump to it immediately. I think the slings and arrows and the fucking working things out with relationships that get in the way or not get in the way, and whether you're going to have children and can you have children and be a good activist and how much is that a distraction. I've had tremendous luck, and the main luck was to be able to be in a rent controlled place, and
Yeah.
it's a co-op, and at various times the co-op was trying to kick me out because they didn't like my friends, or you know what I mean, you're politically incorrect because you're working with those people and
Yeah.
whatever. But I've always felt like I would withstand that, but it's still a very, like, when I think about that now, the main setup was to say, how can I sort everything out in my life, whether it's personal relationships, my children? And I think people should have children. I think it's the most revolutionary act that I've ever done is to have children. But the I think that it's about saying, what does it take to be a soldier in this war? Um, if I need to get my teeth fixed, get your fucking teeth fixed because you're going to have an
Yeah.
abscess on the day when we need you out there. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? There's a kind of, even all the things you resist, things you hate, things
Yeah.
you don't want to do, you can sort of say, well, I guess I better just get it done. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah, that's why
Like,
I got
there's a
sober. I was like, I can't do this work if I'm on drugs. Like I
good
literally have to,
example.
I'm giving up my need to use drugs so that somebody else out there can get high on my behalf. And I'm
Well,
cool.
and getting high, like Bud used to say this, he'd say, most people are admired for their coping strategies, except drug users,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a coping strategy and it's
Yeah.
not acknowledged as that. And every now and then I'll read an essay there was a brilliant essay written by a guy who said how he used to go buy pills off of people who had pain med pills. You know what I mean? Scripts
Mm-hmm.
have always been sold because of poverty. You can
Mm-hmm.
get a shitload of fucking pills and it's going to supplement your income and, you need it. So, and then of course you're selling to someone who also needs it. Anyway, he just talked in a very, I don't know, he's probably straight now or whatever, but he was saying how that during that part of his life, that saved his life. And yet there's this sort of black or white, oh, we'll sprinkle the treatment dust on you and then you'll be abstinent. Like this insane narrative that's going on right now that,
It's either one or
um,
the other.
well, and it's stupid. Most people stop using drugs without ever going to treatment. It's certainly true of drinkers, but we
Mm-hmm.
knew this. If you do the math, what we do, I do a lot of math in BC because we've been either lucky or whatever. When they declared the public health emergency, they poured a bunch of money into keeping track of everything. So you can look up any village in BC and find
Yeah.
out how many people died. Anyway, just saying. So we know a lot. And what they do is estimate in BC that there's 225,000 people who are using drugs from the toxic drug supply and it could die. And 125,000 of those are people who use every day. Another 100 are people who use MDA, snort coke on weekends, whatever, weekend warriors.
Party drugs.
I don't know what to call them. Yeah. But they're just as vulnerable in the sense that a criminalized drug can have anything in it. And we've seen plenty of that. We've seen plenty of people go down and die from what they thought was cocaine.
A lot of them, like this is something I talked about too. I did like a conference on how grief transforms, and I talked about how like Indigenous communities, Black communities, but like people of color have their deaths are usually ignored, but then when it's people in like richer areas or people who like die off of an accidental drug overdose after taking MDMA or whatever, those people, those overdoses are highlighted. That's how Mom Stop the Harm kind of started. It wasn't really like people, it was middle class, upper class women who were like, why the fuck did my son just die? You know what I mean? And it's like now you're paying attention. Now the government wants to include you in conversations, but when it's people on the bottom, it's like it's very a touchy subject. But yeah.
No, we have tremendous hope. And I think that we're trying constantly to look for allies. So we haven't touched on the very most modern difficulty we're having. In drug user groups right now, what I'm finding is at one point I just looked out, a tremendous effort, the fundraising, we got the building, we got the thing, we put up the posters, the fucking drug users are in there. And I look out and they've all got their heads on the table. And it's because at that point, it was benzos and xylazine, and they're passed out. And I think the whole methodology of drug user organizing is popular education. People need to be awake. You're doing leadership development. They know what's going on. And even in a heroin nod, people are often very conscious of what's going on around them, and they're nodding. So I was like, oh shit, is this over now? Is this can't be done? So anyway, I've proceeded on, and who knows what's going on. The main
I
thing
know,
that's
I was
going
gonna
on
bring that up.
thing that's going on though is that stimulant users seem to be the people that are awake. So once we have to tag team people and they're running their own OPS and someone is awake and responsible and knows where the Narcan kit is and blah, 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 then it was all crystal meth crack smoker people that are basically running, for instance, the Nanaimo group. And not all, but you know what I mean. So this whole methodology, then what I start to do is just going, we need allies. This is fucking crazy. I can't, you can't kind of get a VANDU going where you're getting, Garth Mullins and Dean Wilson and, like a bunch of people that are going to become like, I don't know, whatever, leadership, spokespeople, whatever, just saying you just need this. And so we're looking at allyships, and Mom Stop the Harm in Nanaimo was quite strong. We couldn't find anyone, and Mom Stop the Harm in Surrey, even though it's 600,000 people. So, but it was just one of those things. And then a group popped out of nowhere called the Doctors for Safer Drug Policy.
Yeah, I seen that.
They were supposed to put an OPS in the Nanaimo hospital.
And then they never did.
2 years of fucking planning, and they canceled it. Just canceled it and took all the minutes away. I was like, fuck. Anyway, I guess just normal Canadians.
They believe in something for clout, and then it's awful.
Set up a tent outside the hospital. It's not regularly opened, but if we could do enough allyship, we certainly could open it. But they aren't getting charged, just saying. So anyway, it's a great allyship. And what we want is movements that have people with different strengths and weaknesses rather than just the same weaknesses and the same. For sure, drug user groups are extremely powerful, but I'm really freaking out. I mean, people are, I don't know what you're getting out there. We got benzos and trank.
We have that out here too. There's some new stuff in Toronto, starts with an M, metotomidine or something. Metotomidine.
Xylazines gave you these open wounds, metotomidine.
Yes.
So metotomidine, and I'm so pissed off about this because we've got these bureaucracies now that announce drug warnings, and I'm ready to go in and slap them because metotomidine causes hallucinations.
Yeah. And
so I brought it up at the user meeting, and suddenly people are popping off, and they said it doesn't just cause hallucinations. It can happen for a week. It happened to me for a week. And then someone else pops off and someone else. So we're collecting data right off. And that's why the drug user, the raw rank and file right off the street, you use drugs, join the group.
Yeah, because I need to know what's going on
We're not piss testing you.
Yeah,
so that's where you get your raw data. And so I wrote an email to the doctor saying,
And I also, of all places, saw it on a US very I don't know, it's an overdose. I don't know if you ever want to. I spend a lot of time nerding. So what I'll do is follow the Vancouver Police Foundation to see what they're up to, and like know your allies and know your enemies. Keep your enemies even closer. Like
Yeah.
you got to know what's
There's
going
this
on.
that I have only enemies. I have it by my bed. Only enemies come in silence. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's like you better know if I'm not your enemy. I'm on you.
I
better
just
know
want
what
to
you're
know what
working
we're
against.
up. What kind of shit are they saying? What are they doing? Because they're super well organized, and we're not. Just saying.
I know.
This whole thing against decrim was all done by cops, all of it, and they went to politicians. And right now, Carney, just go on Carney's Facebook page today. He says we need to increase the number of RCMP in Canada.
Yeah.
Crime has never been lower in Canada. Crime rates have never been lower, but we're going to increase policing. Fuck. So we're losing that battle in terms of social media and stuff, which is why I'm always sort of frantically spinning around going, isn't there a young person who just has to put this on X? And then, you know what I mean?
Person, but I don't know how to. Hey man, they're
but you're
hating
doing
me.
this.
They're hating me online. Oh God, if you Google my name, it's awful. Actually, right now when I Google my name, it's only good stuff. But give me a few years.
Listen, I don't know. I think
It's discouraging sometimes, but
the end of my speech at UVic, I said, and now I'm going to quote Willie Nelson, which is an odd thing to do. I said, and his quote was, if you fail at something long enough, you become a legend. Because if you look at what I started to do, which was reduce deaths, they've done nothing but increase.
I know. I know.
Someone might blame me. It's like, we were good until Ann came. Well, you know what I mean? I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it's not that. It's like the reason why everybody knows about these deaths is because you put it on the forefront. And if you and Bug didn't sit down and be like, hey, we need to collect people and start getting voices, nobody would have even thought about this shit. So like that's
No, it is. It's a good thing. Anyway, I encourage you to keep going with your work. I do think about coming out to places that are trying to do user groups, and then otherwise,
my mom works at the city, so if you do end up coming, you could probably talk to like the mayor and stuff like that out here if you want.
Well, I don't know if they'll listen, but I'm just thinking of, the secret society being the user group that if you can find, so here's the deal. I keep saying to people, no one believes me about this. So you'll see what your reaction is. Alcoholics Anonymous formed because alcohol was illegal and people were criminals. And then that ended. And then the treatment for alcohol was that you were a degenerate, you would never be cured, and you were to live in a, what do they call them? Insane asylum, whatever. There's another bunch of names for them. But for the rest of your life, you were incorrigible. You could not be fixed. You were, I don't know, I can't remember, moral turpitude or like these awful. Anyway, you go back and look at the language they used. And a group of people said, fuck you. We're alcoholics, but we're okay. And we're going to do this. And they made up AA. I don't care what anyone says about that. The great thing was they were able to work with no funding, with a lot of hatred, trying to recover from criminalized lives. And whether, as I always say, there's no such thing as AA. There's just a bunch of groups, and you might like one group and you might hate another. If it's consistently being shitty, then yeah, you could say some shit. But I'll tell you this, they survived with no funding. And if we want to make anything happen with our groups, we're going to have to take a big lesson from that. And the lesson is we can survive with no funding because we're so fucking hated that if they're going to fund drug user groups right now, the 20 drug user groups in the province of British Columbia, which have been funded for, I can't remember how many years, but maybe 6 years, maybe longer. The funding's ending in May. And the big question is, are these groups going to be able to continue with no funding? And as I say to them, this has happened before. We're okay. And we need to know how to keep going with no funding. And I'll always give out money because what the fuck? These people are, you know what I mean? We used to give out $3 and they used to complain that we gave out $3. They're just coming for the money. I was like, the $3. Yeah, that's
sure.
Anyway, we're doing $10 stipends in Nanaimo, but if we lose our funding, I think we'll always be able to find, and that's the allyship too. We can always scrape together $100 or $200, and that's 20 people, 40 people. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
$5 each is $100. And so I just find it, but I also, we make sure we read the mission statement at the beginning of the meeting. We end with a moment of silence. There's a lot of stuff to learn from, and I didn't copy AA. These things came up organically in the meetings, and I just went, oh, someone wants to do a moment of silence. Okay. And then it became a tradition. It came off the floor. So there's a kind of creativeness and responsiveness and inclusion of what people bring to it. But there's also, and then I think the hardest role is to keep bringing a democracy, that they have to stick with. If there's a conflict, we're going to have the beginning of the conflict, the middle of the conflict, and the end of the conflict, and then we're going to proceed. Because it's extremely destructive to keep giving up or finding out there's now 20 drug user groups or something, like a very personality cut. There's Anne's group.
Yeah, like, no, we're all in this together. We're all fighting for the same thing. So we have to come to the middle and find an agreement.
Which is why the mission statement's important to read at the, you know what I mean? And I think the moment of silence is also, and I learned that from these Nicaraguan organizers in the 90s. They came up and they put on these workshops it was Tools for Peace brought them in. And I don't know if you know, it's probably ancient history to you. Nicaragua had a revolution, and then they did a number of what they'd call campaigns. Almost nobody could read and write. And I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but reading and writing is free. You don't need a lot of tools. You're just going to have some people getting together and showing each other how to read. So, you can see how you can do movements with very little. And then there's other parts of the movements that are much more difficult and costly, and just plod along.
I'll figure it out. I have years to learn. I'm like 27. I started doing this like 5 years. Holy fuck. 6 years ago now. He died in 2020. And then in like 2020, I started delegating. I started doing so much stuff. I made a documentary, a 3-hour documentary about my dad. So yeah, I'm not tired yet. But when I get tired, I'll pass the torch to somebody else.
It's very, very good.
Thank you.
And then I think what, like Dorothy Day, who did a lot of organizing, and she, whatever, she called her autobiography The Long Loneliness. And I don't, that is the hardest part. If you start to feel like you're alone, and I think that's where we want this allyship, and COVID made everything extremely difficult. We lost so much ground, and it's because we couldn't have the in-person meetings. One thing about a local drug user group is that they're not going to go online. They don't necessarily have a phone hell, there must be 5,000 stolen phones a month in Nanaimo. You know what I mean? Like if you go to we're in London, drugs buying phones at the end of the month, and I look around, there's like 5 people lined up. And I go, I know those people, or you know what I mean? They're
and you're like, come
people,
on now.
And they're all trying to get because if you have a loved one that you need to keep in touch with, you need to get them a phone so you can keep in touch with them. That's how it all works. And then, of course, you could try to use libraries more, but they're pretty restricted in their hours. But you know what I mean? I call Facebook poor people's email. At least you can, people have like 10 pages because they've forgotten all those 10 passwords or whatever. But anyway, at least there's some kind of, I wish it was a public utility instead of a whatever it is. But Zuckerberg's nightmare. Anyway, those are the, it's about using what's around you and what other people are using until you can't. And then, just constantly looking for the low tech, easiest, cost free ways of getting things done.
Getting things done. Yeah.
The other thing that's very hopeful as we're moving forward is the other part. If you look at the whole culture of drug users, there's some other people that are awake, and they're called dealers. We call them substance use navigators. And that's a tremendously hopeful group of people.
All the drug dealers I know test their drugs. Like, I'm like, you have no idea, revolutionary people. I'm like, thank you so much. They're like, I'm not killing nobody.
Well, that's why Dolph's going to be important. And we're starting to figure it out. Like what Dolph was doing was so tremendously difficult to do technically that none of the user groups I know of can do it. And like, I can't do it. And then, so we were thinking of what's the in between, what's the muddly bit between.
Yeah.
That's starting to, like, if you, drug users can, or dealers can be very, very competitive and super capitalistic and stuff. And you go, yeah, but what if we had a buyer's co-op and you worked for $30 an hour?
Yeah.
What about that? Wouldn't that be something? Maybe you could even get benefits.
Like, why are we not? I don't know. I always think about it. It's like the dealers are the pharmacists, the people creating the drugs are just the chemists. We just need to put the right labels on the words instead of criminalizing people.
Well, you don't have to go too far up, and we're
Yeah.
talking about a tremendous amount of violence.
Yeah.
I'm trying to cover that more and make people aware of it, because I think it gets left out of the conversation all the time. Because they keep saying gangs and guns, but they don't mention the drugs. I think that part of the tragedy of, you know, they say, oh, tragedy, overdoses, but they don't go tragedy, shootings all over the fucking place, and they're young. And, you know, that real exploitation of a whole class of people that get involved in, you want to be a gangster, and then they just use them as cannon fodder. There's a lot of deaths and a lot of violence.
Yeah, Hamilton is like that too. It's the same. If you Google Hamilton, the store, like my dad, for example, before he was a drug user, and well, no, I guess he was a drug user then too. Before he died of a drug overdose, he was incarcerated for 8 years for manslaughter because he killed somebody in Hamilton. The streets here are very, very rough.
Well, it's a tough town.
Dangerous. It is.
I've always
steel
known that
city.
about, yeah. And Nanaimo's
working town.
Got that.
Same,
although, you know, I'm not seeing shootings in Nanaimo, but Surrey, holy fuck. And then of course they've just moved everywhere. It's just everywhere. And the, you know, the biggest international cartel is now headed by a Canadian, and Canadians are just super hesitant to understand this, you know. Let's go. So the, you know, I don't want to make it more complicated, but I've been trying to bring that in to the perspective. And I want to create a team where someone's doing that work, someone's doing the overdose number work, someone's doing the work on recovery, someone's doing the work on, I don't know, what would it be like when these things, like, how would we model it?
Yeah.
I think Buyers Club's the way to go. I think we could have a Buyers Club for cocaine, and we'd have a very workable, socially acceptable, doable model for legalized cocaine, because this marijuana shops isn't really it. It's too commercial.
Yeah, this is not. Yeah, they definitely commercialized it, and there's so, like, yes, we can learn from what they did with marijuana, but marijuana and alcohol are one thing. Crack, coke, fentanyl, all these things that have been criminalized for so long, that are now polluted for so long. It's like it's going to take a long time to get a regulated supply of those things.
Well, it takes a real imagination.
Yeah.
Switzerland now has a cocaine buyers club in one of the cities, and I've only seen an update from 2 years ago, so I'm really anxious to see what's going to happen next. But it was approved and it's legal, and it's a maximum of 500 members.
Wow.
So the government's smart to do that, because then they don't have to do all the regulation.
Yeah.
They just oversee the top of it, and then, you know, whether someone's selling to someone underage becomes the discipline within the buyers co-op, not
please.
Yeah, like it is smart. I think it's a brilliant way to do it. Everyone can mind their fucking business.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like go fix the roads.
I know. Build some fucking housing.
Like, don't worry about what I'm doing outside.
Yeah, true that. Well, if I try to point this out to people sometimes, if you are homeless and you drink outside, it's actually, you're not allowed to drink in public. You're now a criminal for drinking in public because you're homeless. Like, fuck off. Like, people get so, you know, they're using drugs in public. I'm going, yeah, so would you be if you were homeless? Just saying.
Where else are you going to go?
Yeah. Well, your whole life is kind of exposed. Anyway, okay.
But thank you so much. Yeah, you too. I'm going to keep up with your stuff. You keep up with mine.
Yeah. I'll send you stuff special if I think of you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.